the money will reach the other side, because each network has different characteristics in terms of whether they can support one currency versus the other. The last thing you want is for a consumer to initiate a transfer and the money to be lost.
I'm still thinking about that video we just watched. Not just the information in it, but the feeling it left behind. You know when something ends and the room suddenly feels different? Like the air gets thicker, heavier, almost charged? That's exactly what happened the moment that video faded out. Because halfway through, when they broke down that shift inside Stellar, that tiny piece of information tucked between all the noise, it hit me in the chest like a warning and a promise at the same time.
Up 37 cents. The move was buoyed by strong trading volumes and institutional activity as the network prepares for a major infrastructure overhaul. The token strength comes as major South Korean exchanges Bithumb and Upbit prepare to temporarily suspend XL.
And the thought wouldn't leave me. Wait, this isn't normal. Something is about to move. Not a small move. Not a hype-driven pump. But one of those deep, tectonic shifts that only happen when a network that's been quiet for too long finally starts stretching its arms again. I sat there for a few seconds after the video ended, not even touching my phone, just letting that realization settle. Because the truth is, we've seen a lot of market noise over the years, a lot of predictions, a lot of drama, a lot of this is it moments that fizzled out in 24 hours. But this feels different. It feels like the beginning of something that's been building quietly in the background while everyone else was distracted. And the video just confirmed it in the most unexpected way. Because the thing most people don't understand about Stellar is this. Its biggest moves never start loud. They start quietly, and then they explode. Think back on Stellar's history. Every time something major happened, a partnership, a corridor activation, a liquidity shift, it didn't start with a headline. It started with a whisper, a small update, a silent integration, a subtle change in tone from someone inside the ecosystem. And that's exactly what we saw in that video. It was subtle, almost too subtle. Most people probably missed it completely. But for anyone who has held XLM long enough, for anyone who has followed these patterns, for anyone who understands how institutional adoption actually looks in the early phases, that moment was not small. It was the spark. And what made it even more powerful was the silence behind it. No screaming. No thumbnails yelling "moon soon." No dramatic predictions. Just facts. Just signals. Just a quiet confirmation that something big is loading in the background. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. Because you could feel, almost physically feel, that this wasn't just another update. This wasn't the usual routine news. This wasn't one of those marketing-friendly look-at-us moments. No, this felt like Stellar taking a breath before stepping into a new phase. And I know you probably felt the same thing watching that video. That mix of excitement and confusion and curiosity, where your brain goes, hold on. Why does this feel bigger than they're saying? Why is my intuition reacting this strongly? Why does it feel like they're preparing for something? Because that's how major moves always start. Not with fireworks, not with hype, but with a shift in tone, a shift in behavior, a shift in positioning. Think of it like being in a room with a giant asleep in the corner. For a long time, you don't hear anything. You don't see anything. Nothing changes. But then one day you hear a small breath, tiny rumble, a slight movement, nothing big, nothing dramatic, but enough to make you look up and say, wait, it's waking up. That video was that sound, that little movement, that subtle shake under the ground. The moment that tells you something massive is coming even though nobody is announcing it yet. And when Stellar moves, it doesn't move alone. Liquidity moves with it. Institutional rails shift with it. Payment corridors align with it. Cross-border demand follows it. That is the real reason this moment matters. Because what we saw in that video was not noise, it was alignment. Alignment between tech maturity, regulatory clarity, institutional readiness, and macro timing. And that alignment doesn't happen often. When it does, you either recognize it early, or you get left behind. So here we are, on the edge of something big, something quiet but powerful, something that's been building while the market was arguing about things that won't matter a month from now. A major Stellar XLM move is coming. And now, after seeing that video, we know exactly why. Take a breath. Let it sink in. Because this is only the beginning. Once you notice the shift happening around Stellar, it becomes impossible to unsee it. It's like when you're walking through a crowded place and suddenly realize everyone is subtly moving in the same direction. Not because they announced it, but because something ahead is pulling them. That's what's happening with XLM right now. You can feel this quiet gravitational force starting to form around it. And the wild part? Most people think the market is still in the same phase it was in 6 months ago. They think we're still in the maybe it will pump, maybe it won't limbo. But the truth is, the environment around Stellar is changing faster than anyone realizes. Let's start with the simplest but most powerful observation. Money is getting more serious. Not loud, not flashy, just serious. Whenever you see the loud accounts fighting on social media, that's retail energy. But when you start seeing infrastructure conversations, integration testing, institutional partnerships, regulatory dialogues, that's when you know the adults are entering the room. And that's exactly the transition XLM is sitting inside right now. Think of it like a bridge being built between two continents. When construction first starts, nobody cares. There's noise, dust, delays. People complain. It feels like nothing meaningful is happening. But once the structure gets close to completion, the tone shifts. People start paying attention. Companies start planning. Investors start positioning. By the time the bridge is ready to open, everyone pretends they always knew it would be a big deal. XLM is that bridge. And the final pieces are being welded into place. One of the reasons this moment feels heavier, almost electric, is because Stellar is not just hoping for adoption. It is already sitting inside sectors where real demand exists. Micropayments, remittances, stablecoin mobility, business-to-business settlement, cross-border liquidity, digital identity infrastructure. These aren't dreamland ideas. These are needs, urgent needs. And markets always follow urgency. Right now, governments across the world are quietly scrambling to upgrade their financial plumbing. Not because they suddenly love innovation, but because the old systems are breaking under their own weight. Slow settlement, high fees, fragmented rails, compliance nightmare, clunky reporting, too many moving parts that don't talk to each other. And guess which networks have the architecture to solve that without needing a billion-dollar patch job? Exactly. The same networks everyone keeps underestimating: XRP, XLM, XDC, HBAR. But today, the spotlight is on Stellar. Here's the real secret nobody likes to say out loud. Institutional adoption doesn't start with price. It starts with silence. It starts with engineers testing integration. It starts with compliance teams reviewing frameworks. It starts with back-office experiments. It starts with liquidity trial runs. It starts with pilots nobody talks about until they work. By the time retail sees a headline, the deal has been completed for months. If you're paying attention, you can already see Stellar's fingerprints on these early shifts. The way certain payment companies are restructuring. The way remittance platforms are positioning. The way digital identity is becoming a requirement. The way regulated stablecoins are being embedded into cross-border workflows. It's all pointing in one direction. XLM is about to be threaded into the global financial fabric in ways people won't fully understand until it's already done. And the funny thing? Most retail investors will miss the entire buildup because they're too busy waiting for a flashy announcement that will never come. Stellar doesn't operate like that. They do the work quietly, consistently, without chest beating. And that's why the market misreads them every single cycle. But this time, the quiet is louder. This time, the clues are not tiny, they're huge. You can see it in the sudden surge of developer activity. You can see it in the new corridors opening behind the scenes. You can see it in how much attention regulators are giving to compliant cross-border systems. You can see it in the way liquidity providers are starting to hedge into transport-ready digital assets. It's all preparing for movement. You can also feel a psychological shift among longtime holders. This isn't hopium. This isn't maybe one day. This is people who've been watching the foundation being built for years and are now saying, "Oh, this is finally it." Because here's the truth most people ignore. Markets don't explode out of nowhere. They explode after years of pressure building quietly under the surface. The same way a seed becomes a tree. The growth doesn't happen when you see it. It happens underground, in the dark, in silence. What you see later is just the reveal. That's what XLM is approaching right now, the reveal. Think about what happens when the world's biggest remittance players begin shifting volume through faster, cheaper rails. Think about what happens when stablecoins need interoperability instead of isolation. Think about what happens when financial institutions need a network that can move value efficiently without sacrificing compliance. Those conditions don't create hype. They create inevitability. And that's why Stellar feels different today. It's not screaming. It's not begging for attention. It's not chasing trends. It's simply becoming too useful for the world to ignore. There's a moment every investor faces where they have to decide whether they trust the noise or the patterns. XLM is showing patterns. Real ones. Deep ones. Patterns that historically lead to major movements. This doesn't feel like speculation anymore. It feels like alignment. And alignment is always the final stage before momentum kicks in. Stellar isn't preparing for a small move. It's preparing for a repositioning. A shift from being an underrated asset to being a system people rely on without even realizing it. That's the quiet transformation happening right now. And if the signals are right, if everything continues lining up the way it has been, then the next phase won't just be interesting. It will be unforgettable. It's fascinating how often people confuse volatility with risk. They see XLM moving sideways or dipping slightly and immediately assume it's dangerous. But the real risk is missing the structural changes happening behind the scenes. That's what separates casual traders from those who actually understand how financial systems evolve. And right now, Stellar is undergoing one of those shifts that will eventually make today's sideways action look like nothing. Because here's the thing. Networks like XLM don't exist in a vacuum. They are woven into a web of global infrastructure, quietly supporting experiments, pilots, and institutional programs that most retail investors will never even hear about. And those programs aren't designed for hype. They're designed for efficiency, reliability, and scale. They're the kind of moves that only look small until they ignite something much larger. Take liquidity corridors, for instance. You might glance at a chart and say, nothing's happening here. But behind the scenes, corridors are being tested, mapped, and funded. Banks, payment providers, and fintech companies are quietly moving money, testing transaction speeds, and verifying compliance layers. Each of these little steps may seem insignificant, but together they form a foundation for explosive adoption. And when those systems are ready, the flow will no longer be trickling, it will be a surge. Now, consider adoption from the perspective of utility. Stellar is not some speculative token designed to ride hype waves. It's a tool, a system, a backbone for cross-border transfers and digital asset movements. And utility doesn't wait for price charts to confirm it. It grows quietly, step by step, until it reaches a tipping point. That's exactly what we're seeing. The infrastructure is in place, the corridors are live, and the groundwork is solid. The only missing piece is volume, and volume has a funny way of arriving when the system is ready. And it's not just banks. Remittance companies, fintech apps, stablecoin operators, all of them are evaluating XLM because it solves real problems. Transaction speed, cost, settlement certainty, interoperability with other ledgers. These are not abstract concepts. These are operational necessities. And when an asset solves operational necessities, it doesn't just get used once. It becomes part of the flow of business. It becomes indispensable. Then there's the psychology of early positioning. Those who have been paying attention to Stellar for years know this pattern. Small updates, quiet partnerships, regulatory clarity, and steady development are always followed by rapid adoption. The market may lag in recognition, but the underlying networks don't. They continue to evolve, improve, and integrate until the moment comes when they are suddenly everywhere. And when that happens, price becomes a reflection of utility rather than speculation. That's the point where you stop talking about potential and start talking about real-world impact. And Stellar is moving into that territory. You can feel it in the way liquidity providers are hedging, in the way exchanges are integrating new features, and in the subtle hints from compliance teams that networks like XLM are now part of strategic roadmaps. What makes this moment even more compelling is how global macro factors are aligning. Governments are digitizing payments faster than expected, central banks are exploring tokenized currencies, and the demand for transparent, low-cost cross-border transfers has never been higher. XLM sits perfectly at the intersection of these forces. Capable, compliant, and ready for integration at scale. And unlike other projects that depend on hype cycles, XLM's adoption is driven by necessity. Now imagine what happens when all these elements collide. Institutional demand, cross-border payment needs, regulatory alignment, and infrastructure readiness. It doesn't result in a slow climb. It results in a wave. A sudden surge that moves faster than anyone predicted, catching latecomers off guard. And for those who recognize the signals early, it's the moment that separates winners from observers. And that's exactly the stage XLM is entering. We're no longer talking about potential. We're talking about preparedness, about positioning, about networks ready to execute at the scale the world demands. And when execution begins, the narrative shifts from speculation to utility, from possibility to inevitability. Because the truth is, markets always reward those who solve problems that matter. And Stellar is solving problems that millions of businesses, banks, and people encounter every single day. Instant settlements, near-zero fees, cross-border accessibility, interoperability with other digital assets. These are not luxuries. These are essentials. And essentials don't rely on hype. They rely on adoption. So when you watch the charts and feel frustrated by sideways movement, remember, the quiet periods are part of the buildup. The network is stabilizing, liquidity is moving, and institutions are aligning. And when those forces converge, the movement will be undeniable, sweeping across the market like a wave. Those who position themselves wisely now will be the ones who see the most benefit when the surge hits. And here's the key takeaway. This isn't just about price. It's about understanding the systemic shift. XLM isn't just a token. It's a bridge that connects old systems to new digital rails. A bridge that solves inefficiencies and enables global liquidity flows. And bridges don't build themselves overnight. They take time, alignment, and vision. The vision is clear now. The alignment is happening quietly. And once the final pieces click into place, XLM will stop being a quietly underrated asset and start being a critical component of a financial system that billions rely on. That's the moment that insiders are watching. That's the moment institutions have been quietly preparing for. And that's the moment retail investors need to recognize before it happens. The stage is set. The groundwork is done. And the next chapter in Stellar's story is about to unfold. If you've been paying attention, you already know this. The quiet periods in XLM's history were never nothing. They were preparation. They were building the foundation while the rest of the market was distracted by noise. And now all that preparation is converging. It's aligning like clockwork, and the implications are massive. Because when adoption meets necessity, price isn't speculation anymore. It becomes a reflection of real-world utility. And XLM is standing right at that intersection. Institutions are quietly moving in. Liquidity corridors are getting ready. Compliance frameworks are in place. All the invisible gears that make a network indispensable are spinning quietly in the background. And soon everyone will notice. The thing most people don't realize is that the real movement rarely happens in public view. It happens in the infrastructure. It happens in pilot programs. It happens with money quietly flowing through new rails before anyone even tweets about it. And that's exactly where XLM is right now. The groundwork is complete. The stage is set. And when the wave hits, the retail market will only see the tip. What makes this moment even more extraordinary is how global macro factors are pushing everything in XLM's favor. Cross-border payments are exploding. Stablecoins are becoming a requirement, not an option. Regulatory clarity is improving. And companies that used to ignore blockchain are now racing to integrate. XLM sits perfectly in the middle of all this. ready to capture attention, usage, and capital in ways that could have taken years if it weren't for this precise alignment. And for long-term holders, this is the kind of moment you dream about. Not hype, not Twitter chaos, not temporary pumps, but a real, systemic shift that puts Stellar in the spotlight because it solves real problems. This is when the market stops treating XLM as another token and starts treating it like infrastructure that matters, the kind of infrastructure the financial world relies on. So here's the takeaway: don't just watch. Position yourself thoughtfully. Observe the adoption signals, notice where liquidity is moving, and recognize the patterns that historically signal big moves. XLM isn't just waiting for a price surge. It's preparing to demonstrate its full utility. And when that moment comes, early recognition could make all the difference. If this resonates with you, do one thing. Hit the like button to ensure this insight reaches other XLM holders who might still be sleeping on what's happening. Subscribe if you want to stay ahead of these quiet but powerful moves before the mainstream notices. And drop a comment telling me what you think will be the biggest catalyst for Stellar in the next 6 months. Is it new institutional adoption, cross-border partnerships, or something else entirely? Because here's the truth: those who understand this shift early won't just watch the market move. They'll be ready when it does. And XLM is about to prove why patience, observation, and early positioning matter more than hype ever will.